All right.
All right, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon for maybe some who are coming on. Welcome to the FEI Long Island call to discuss the real estate market and forecast for post COVID-19. Just want to thank everybody again for coming on the line, especially our presenter today, Brian Lee, who joined Newmark Knight Frank back in 2004. He is one of Long Island's most experienced and sought after real estate advisors with a career that has spanned over 36 years. Specializing in tenant representation, Mr. Lee is known for providing creative real estate services and solutions that are tailored to the needs of his clients. His scope of expertise is drawn in large part from his education and experience. He is Long Island's only real estate advisor to hold both a senior leader in corporate real estate designation and a board certified in corporate real estate certification from Cornet Global, in addition to a master's degree in real estate from New York University. Moreover, Mr. Lee has a vast experience completing an array of complex real estate transactions on behalf of his clients. So again, throwing out an introduction for Mr. Lee. Want to thank him for coming on. Thank everybody else who's coming on from near and far. My fellow board members for being on the call. So with that being said, this is hopefully going to be an interactive conversation. There will be some questions. I think we have about 5 of them that will pop up throughout the conversation, and Brian will direct people to let you know when that's coming up. So if you have questions, feel free, ask as we're going along. If you can, mute yourself throughout the presentation, just in case you have someone who walks in and starts having a conversation with you. We don't have to hear it as well. Without further ado, thank you everyone for coming on, and Brian, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. Thanks, FEI, for having me speak. And I think it's an interesting topic for today. I'm really excited about change and what's happening in real estate. And, COVID has really accelerated the evolution of the digital mobility, which is obviously going to impact the office of the future, as well as e-commerce's impact on the retail sector and the positive impact that it's had on the industrial sector. This evolution of live, work is merging. And I think the big question everyone has is what's going to happen after COVID is over, is the compelling question. How is it going to change? And the evolution of the workplace, the workplace must be more than just a place you work. It must enhance your firm's value. And how that's going to impact is going to change by, the organizational cohesion and culture of the firm, client relationship building, recruitment and retention of employees, knowledge sharing and mentoring, how much cross-selling and collaboration and expression of your brand and purpose. So, it's going to be a more agile workforce where there's going to be more flexibility, allowing people to work from home and work remotely. I think it's really going to be a function of your individual company and how you operate. For example, law firms, you can't put a first-year associate attorney in their home and expect them to be mentored by the senior partners of the firm. You need that interpersonal collaboration. And I think that a lot of people, while there may be more flexibility in working from home 1 or 2 days a week, I don't really see the future of the workplace being completely remote. And so I don't believe that the office buildings are going to be see-through buildings that no one's going to be occupying in the future. In fact, I think that companies want their employees to get that culture and get that interpersonal cohesion that you only get when you meet someone, getting a cup of coffee, when you're sitting in a room together. Zoom has definitely created the ability to diminish that remoteness of just a conference call, because you can see people, you can see their reactions, but there's nothing like being together in a space. And so I'm not sure that the office of the future is dead. I think that the workplace itself will change. You'll be looking at more outdoor space, so rooftop decks, outdoor patios. You'll be looking at more agile event space in your facility where you can collaborate, sit, work together, and then activity-based working where you work in teams. So when you also look at the workplace and you look at what work is ideal for home versus office or mobile, your ideal remote work is when you're focus driven. Your head's down at your desk and you're working on something where you really need no interaction from others. It's real process driven, cyclical, administrative, very structured, and so you're not relying on other people. The ideal office work is going to become, that tasks that benefit from the energy and buzz in the office, complex problem solving with others, iterative, less structured work, creative and highly collaborative work. So I think that people are going to return to the office. I think especially a lot of the younger people that want to get out of their apartments, that don't want to be there, and a lot of people don't have the office space in their homes to work effectively. Some other things that are interesting, I find that there are a lot of sensors. So there is the ability to know who's working in your office, where, how they work, where they move in the office, and where you can then save money by creating an office that impacts those people. In the past, and I'd be interested to any of you to know, is that in the past, when you've talked about putting sensors in the office to be able to track where people go, what their temperature is, all of these different things, HR would always put their hands up in the air and say, no, you can't do that, it's Big Brother, and the employees will rebel. It's interesting that I'm seeing now that more companies and buildings are trying to do this to create a safe environment and to know where people are and how they're going to work. So I'd be interested in anyone's, what your companies are doing, and are you working from home full-time, part-time, and what do you think your companies are going to do in the future with respect to mobility in working versus having everyone at home? And we have our first question, which asks that. So it's if you're going to work permanent work from home strategies after COVID, part-time work from home strategies, or all employees will return to the office.
I'm just going to give everybody a little bit of time to answer, and then I'll share the results as soon as it looks like everybody's participated.
And then we have a follow-up question that will be, what percentage of your workforce will return to the office? So right now we have permanent work from home only 5%, which is consistent with what I believe. Part-time 73%, and then all 23% come back to the office. Some other factors that are driving the workplace are costs of space and where your buildings are. We've seen a dramatic, transformation or the evolution speeding, the acceleration of people moving out of the city. We have been seeing these trends for the last 4 to 5 years, the millennials, which are now in their late 30s, having kids that are now moving to the suburbs. We have found that that trend has been ongoing for the last 3 to 4 to 5 years. When they start having kids, not everyone can afford a 2-3 bedroom apartment in the city, especially in New York with the prices. And so we've seen that people moving out, and in seeing that, COVID has just accelerated that, which everyone knows. They've seen that the residential properties in the suburbs are being sold, and within a day or 2 days of being put on the market, there's very little supply left, and so people have left the city. I think that the interesting thing is what they've said is, okay, now is everyone going to take office space in Long Island because of this, or in the tri-state area? And what's interesting is I've been working with a number of institutional clients, like a Citibank, and then some other financial firms and other companies. So I'd say I have about 10 clients that between March and June, I was doing surveys, showing them properties. I even had a few property tours during that time. And to date, not one of those firms has taken any space on Long Island. Everyone's kind of been in a wait and see approach to what they do. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if their employees are going to even come to the office in the suburbs. So they're not making those decisions now. So that can has basically been kicked down the road. And so the Long Island real estate market is actually in pretty good shape overall, compared to other markets around the country. Our office space vacancy rate is up to about 10% now. It was down below 10% before COVID, but compared to New Jersey and Westchester, Connecticut, that had much higher vacancy rates, and our demand is over the last 10 years has really been from the medical users, right? The big hospital institutions that are going out into the market. In Lake Success, for example, Northwell has leased over close to almost 2 million square feet in the Lake Success Great Neck marketplace over the last 10 years. So, I mean, that's a substantial portion of the supply there. And we can tell just in this last quarter, NYU Langone took over the old King Cullen building in Bethpage for 60,000 feet. And they also leased the entire Sears store on Franklin Avenue in Garden City. And then Northwell, took down another 11,000 feet in Great Neck in the last quarter. So we're still seeing that medical, it's slowed down, but that's been the primary driver of demand for office space. So office space, what's interesting in the pandemic is we've seen a significant amount relative to historical trends of sublease space coming on the market. I have over 20 15,000 square feet or above spaces, for example, in Long Island that are now available for sublease that came on after COVID, which is a pretty significant number. I think that what's interesting when you look from a labor perspective in the office market, the labor market itself, most of the labor losses have been in the hospitality and retail sector, restaurants, hotels. The office sector, while it's down, office employment is down about 10% or furloughed. We haven't seen a lot of companies do mass layoffs like they had in prior recessions. So I think once the pandemic subsides, probably around the end of the summer when people are vaccinated, I think you're going to start to see the offices on a much more significant basis be occupied again. and companies are going to start to rehire. Obviously, when the pandemic's over, you're going to get rehiring in all areas. So right now, the fundamentals of the office market are pretty good. We haven't seen, since the vacancy rate had been below 10% for direct space, we haven't seen a lot of landlords significantly discounting their asking rents. And the market's been kind of quiet. There hasn't been a lot of velocity, there hasn't been a lot of activity, and there hasn't been a lot of transactions. So I find that you're going to have some players that see this as a tremendous opportunity to, arbitrage or leverage the market to get a long-term deal, either in one of these sublease spaces that are available or a direct deal that a landlord really wants to get some space leased and get some activity. There are always buildings that have a higher vacancy than the average where people are demanding more space. So I think that the people who know their business and know what they're going to do, a lot of law firms, accounting firms, and companies that are not significant remote workforce, I think people are going to be able to take advantage of this market and do very well if they react. When you compare this to New York City, New York City, the amount of people that have gone back to the office are probably about 10%. In Long Island, I think we're probably closer to about 30 to 50% occupied in buildings. I know when I look in my building, the parking lot is about half full, and people are coming back to the office. When I go to other buildings that I represent or am doing property tours with tenants, we're seeing people in the buildings. It's obviously not full capacity by any stretch of the imagination, but people are much more engaged on Long Island compared to the city. The city is really a disaster right now, and the reason for that is that people are afraid to get into public transportation, afraid to walk in the streets where you don't have social distancing, and also getting in elevators and being in lobbies of buildings. We're seeing about a 10 to 15% occupancy rate in the city of people back in their spaces. What's also interesting in the city is that we have seen a correction in rents. Rents have gone, are about 15 to 20% lower, maybe 10, between 10, 15% lower off the face rent. And we're also seeing significant contributions for work letters. There was a deal that was recently done in the city where they gave a $150 work letter and 22 months of free rent on a, I think, a 10 or 11, 12-year deal. So, there are definitely, the New York City market has been much more impacted by this than the Long Island market in the office sector. Most of the office tenants are still paying rent.
Hey,
One of
Brian,
the huge benefits, yeah.
Hey, Tom Ambry from Estee Lauder here. Those percentages that you were quoting there, right? I understand how New York City is very slow. We as a company, we've returned more on the island than we have in the city locations. But longer term impact here, right? I'm getting the feeling from you that we're going to get back to, or at least what's coming across is we're going to get back to where we were as far as returning into the office with accounting firms and law firms and other businesses. What percentage, though, do you think will be long term? Will we see a long term reduction in occupancy? Right. I mean, everything I'm hearing is companies are looking at their workforce and we're not going to operating the way we were. The work from home will stick for a portion of the workforce, and the footprints that companies are going to occupy are going to be reduced, right? What percentage are you seeing as where we're going to end up here, right? Because we're not going to get back to 100% occupancy. I don't think so anyway. And maybe you disagree, right? But what percentage are we going to get back to, and how much of a permanent correction will there be in the demand?
It's a great question, and that's the question that nobody knows the answer to. I think that there are a couple of issues that I think are important, and it'd be interesting, what people can actually work remotely and remain productive. Okay, I know from a personal perspective in my office where we have our staff mostly working from home, it's you need to get things done. You call people, they're not at their computer. I'll be back in my computer in 5 minutes. Oh, I'm out of the house. I'll be back in 15 minutes. So I think long-term productivity is going to drive which employees can work effectively outside of the office and not work outside of the office. I think it's also going to be interesting, in order to create that corporate identity and that connection with people, I think they need to be in the office at some level of time. When you think about what large costs are for corporations, it's replacing employees, right? Your cost, if you have a good employee that leaves, now you have to hire a new one, train them, get them up to speed. What is the cost of that? It's a significant cost to the company. So if I'm working remotely all the time, what's my connection to the company? If a headhunter calls me up and says, okay, I can go to L'Oreal for $5,000 more a year, $10,000 more a year, and I can work at home and do the exact same thing, what's going to keep them from moving to another company? So I think while the office is going to change, a lot of that office is going to change to more collaborative space, event space, to bring people in, to create that corporate culture, to create that identity, to create that desire to be together as a firm, and that loyalty. If you're not with your person next to you, do you know their kids? Do you know their spouses? Do you know what's going on in their lives? That's important to getting a real culture. And so to answer your question specifically, what percentage? Maybe the amount of space demanded goes down 10 to maybe 20%. I'll give you an example that is different than that. MSC Industrial, which if you saw the Newsday article, they had 130,000 square foot headquarters here in Melville. They moved half their headquarters to North Carolina because they're a national distribution company. So they announced on Wednesday that they were moving into leased space into, I believe, 26,000 feet when they had a 130,000 foot building. I don't know after they split their headquarters whether that 130,000 foot building was fully occupied or not. But if you say it's not fully occupied, then they reduced their footprint by about 80%. So I think it's going to be dependent upon the company and how they operate and what the functions of the people are. And really what being together in an office from a workflow and work, ability to get work to your clients is going to be.
Yeah, all really good points. I think, the culture point's important as, the type of workers, right? If your workers in your location are doing something that needs to be on site, maybe it's, I think of manufacturing or factory type things, or where you're actually interacting and to interact with people directly face to face. But I do think, and we've been trying to establish what the future is here. There is going to be definitely a certain percentage that will not be coming into the office on a regular basis. We will need to probably maintain that social interaction, getting people together on a regular basis for all the reasons you brought up, Brian. I think legitimate, but I'm just thinking that it's going to be even 10 to that's that was lower than I thought you would say, especially for those professional type roles that don't need to, can work effectively from home, right? And I don't know what the mix is on the island, right? I don't know what the mix is as far as what percentage are people that are in roles that can work remote versus what roles that need to be in person.
Yeah, there are many roles that, for example, call centers. Okay, I'm handling a 350,000 square foot, 3-building call center in Hagerstown, Maryland, that Citibank operated for their loan and credit card call centers. They closed that facility 2 years ago. 100% of they didn't fire one employee, 100% of their employees now work from home. And that's all based on technology. But you have to understand, in the call center business, their phones and computers, they know exactly how many calls they accept a day. They know how long they've been on those calls. They know what the result of those calls are. And so everything is totally monitored. And I think that, so you're absolutely right, Tom, that the function of what they do is going to drive where they are, as well as, in the city, for example, I represent a number of technology companies in the city, and you say technology companies, wow, they can all work remotely. And what's interesting is that, after the pandemic, when they're talking about allowing all of their employees like Microsoft and Google and Facebook, well, it's funny that during the pandemic, I think it was in April or maybe May, after the pandemic started and everyone was working remotely, was it Microsoft took a 730,000 square feet of space, the entire Farley post office building that's coming available. So they leased that during the pandemic. Google has about 1 million square feet under construction. They haven't stopped construction of their space. So, those companies are, I believe, are planning on having their people come back and occupy those offices. One of my clients who's in at least a full floor in the World Trade Center is a technology company. That company, the CEO of the president of the company tells me, look, I'd love to have all my people back in the office, but we can't get enough people to hire in the New York metro area, so we have people working remotely. If I could, I'd bring all my people back. And he said all of his people in New York, most of them are younger. I walk in there, I feel like I'm in an old age, I feel like I should be put in an old age home. Everyone's 25, 28 years old, and so you walk in there, they all want to get back to the office because they don't have the living space, right? They're late 20s, early 30s. They and their wives are both working from home. Sometimes they have kids, and now they don't have help-ins. So, a lot of those people want to get back to the office. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't see any new office buildings being built in Long Island in the near future. I can tell you that.
Hey, Brian, one thing that I've heard a few clients talk about is that, with the real estate with the rental rates reducing themselves a little bit in Manhattan to draw people in or keep people in, you may actually get businesses that are currently elsewhere thinking about, now I can afford Manhattan. So there's that factor of outside people coming in versus people just, running away.
Well, I will tell you, for the first time in my 36 years working out here during this cycle, companies on Long Island were expanding in Manhattan. And that was usually what's happened is when the rent spikes in Manhattan, the companies look at it and say, who can I move out to the suburbs because I'm paying so much for space in Manhattan. This cycle, interestingly, that accounting firms, law firms, engineering firms, technology companies, you go where the employees are. That's basically, real estate corporate hiring 101. You open your facilities where the people are. And the people were in New York, and that's where they wanted to be. And so I've never seen a bigger spread in rents, right? You go to the GM building, it's $150 a foot in rent. They're renting at Hudson Yards, $110, $120 a foot in rent. You can move out to RXR Plaza for $32 or $33 a foot. So, you're talking about a huge spread in rents, but that's where the activity was, that's where the growth was, that's where the business was, and it's part of doing business. Your real estate cost is part of doing business. And just another point, the death of New York, there's no other, I've traveled extensively around the world over the years, and there is no other city like New York. And while there will be companies that relocate out of New York, the tourists are going to flock in here. Once the pandemic is over and people can travel, I think you're going to see a rapid increase in economic activity in New York, and you're going to see restaurants opening up left and right. You're going to see the museums occupied. You're going to see people going to Broadway. You're going to see people going to the Knicks games. They're even going to go see the Knicks, okay? That's how, maybe, okay? So I think there's definitely going to be that change in the market. So I'm not as negative on the occupancy level of space after speaking to a lot of clients. I mean, just look at our statistics of people saying how many people were going to work from home full time. It was less than 5% of the respondents on this call. So I think that's an interesting thing. Maybe we can get our next question up there, Kelly, which is, do you anticipate the need for office or industrial space in the future? So, Tom, I think I know where you're going with this question. And then we'll switch on to, and if anyone doesn't have any more questions on the office market, we'll switch to the industrial market a little bit and get a sense of where that is.
People are still responding, so I'm just going to give a couple, 30 more seconds here. A few more seconds.
Well, while that question's going on, Brian, one of the other things that I've observed is some companies are not making decisions on their real estate space yet, their office space yet, because they're waiting to see, what's going to happen with the changes in the pandemic solutions, and also waiting to see if they do have to have fewer employees because they can work from home. Do they need more space in the office to keep people spaced out on a permanent basis? So that balance of working from home but keeping some space to spread out is still holding people from making some decisions.
And Manny, if I could add to that too, there's, I'm seeing is there's also a lot of learnings that are still being collected about the tools that people can use when they're not in the office, that to help them collaborate more. So Brian, as you were saying earlier, we want to bring people together for certain work. We're also finding there's ways to do that remotely with some of the the tools that we have available to us now.
Well, I think that was the big surprise of this was how seamlessly companies were able to have their employees work from home, and technology advancements have been tremendous, especially with companies going to the cloud. You're not relying on your server in your IT closet in your office anymore. All you need is a broadband connection and you can connect. So I would say I've been working remotely for years because of my nature of my business, and I have a laptop and I connect to the system. So I've been working remotely for years, but I come into the office every day because I just find there's no traffic, there's no one in my build, there are not tremendous amount of people in the building. I can focus, I don't have distractions. So I come in every day, but I'm on the ground floor, and it's easy, and I have a big office, so I have no one near me. But yeah, I think technology has proven that this works, and I think that was the big surprise of most companies or a lot of people, was that how seamless it was, that people could get up and running in their homes very quickly and easily. And us in the suburbs, it's different in Long Island because a lot of us, and it depends what age you are, it's harder to work from home when you're, 35 and have a couple little kids running around and the dog barking than it is for people whose kids they're empty nesters and the kids are out of their house or they're in school all day, if you know, and other factors. So I think that all impacts that. And the results of the last question was 52% of the people said that they would require less space. So it's going to be interesting. But Manny, I agree with your assessment that during times of disruption, people tend to do nothing, right? They try to go back and wait and see what happens. Unless there is a desperate need to do something, they don't. And so you always have that situation where, you know, right now, look, my revenue is down about 75% because, you know, I work on transactions and transactions are down. I'm doing more helping clients mitigate leases, you know, reduce costs, get deferments of rents, renegotiation, you know, and it's not a monetary, but I do it as a service to my clients. And so I think you're right that people are doing nothing. They're going to wait and see what happens after people return to work. But with the, you know, the one thing about the space and the market out
Hi,
here.
I'm trying to talk to somebody in your billing area about a possibility of an open bill.
Oh.
I'm not quite sure if it was paid.
Someone's not on mute. Anyway, so my
account number is
my last.
3,
Kelly,
4,
Kelly, can you please mute
4, 6.
John on his side?
Oh, sorry.
So my last point on that is that I think that once the pandemic is over and people start to get back to work, I think over time as leases expire, people will reevaluate their workplace scenario. You know, we do workplace strategies, so you come in and really see where it is. Okay. Anyway,
Hey, Brian.
so moving on. Yes.
Brian, it's Hussein Ali Khan.
Hi, Hussein.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you here.
I'm well, thanks. Good to see you.
Great observations, by the way. However, I might suggest that guys like you and me who are real New York boosters may be a little over optimistic about the future of office markets in general and perhaps New York in particular. I think you're right that maybe the client mix will change and different people will take up sublet space and whatever's open because New York is such a powerhouse. But I think the way that people use real estate will change pretty dramatically. You know, I mean, I used to go to the office every day at 200 Vesey Street, and now, thank God, I don't have to go to the office every day. I think I picked up about 2 to 3 hours of productivity. So I think I think we may be a little too optimistic because of our sort of generation and experience. But I think that people are going to really have to change what's available at the office to draw people back in and make up for that productivity increase and expense reduction.
Well, I agree with you more in New York City than on Long Island because the commute times are much less. It's not as aggravating to get to and from the office. But no, I do agree that there will be less requirements for every person coming to the office every day. And especially, I think especially the commuters to New York, if they can work 2 days from home, that's going to dramatically impact their lifestyles and their lives. But I do think that they're going to want to get back to the office 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, you know, that's, you know, I don't know yet. And it's also what the companies will allow them to do. So,
you know, I think, Brian, you made a good point before about, you know, the empty nesters versus the people with kids versus the, you know, the people entering the workforce that, or people that may not have a large footprint at home to work in, right? I think the answer to the question, I think, you know, Holly, that your point is valid, right? People are different. People have different perspectives, and that's why I think a percentage. That's why I was so focused on the percentage, because what impact will that have in aggregate, right? On what footprint companies are going to require to support that workforce that we know will return to the office. It's just how much, right? And what does that office look like? And collaboration space for those times that you need to collaborate versus a place that you go to just work, right?
Yeah, that's why I said about 10 to 20%, I think,
Yeah.
is probably a more of a realistic number than 50% or, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's great to have these conversations and differing point of views, because I think it's, we're all going to see what happens in the future. I find that the pendulum always seems to outswing the reality of the market. When we first had hoteling, I did Nationwide Insurance's first hoteling facility in the country in Queens. And after that, everyone said, we reduced about 25% or more of the required space. And everyone said, everyone's going to hotel from now on. And, it just proved to be, wrong or not happening that quickly. Another thing was that with computers, no one was going to use paper anymore. And I will tell you that everyone had printers, and you'd print everything out, and the paper consumption. I'm happy to say that I have numerous clients now that have 0 file cabinets in their offices. 0. Hundreds of people with no file cabinets. So it's great for our forests that we're not going to be printing out as much paper. And the next generation doesn't print anything out. We're just ingrained to doing it, and we're slowly changing.
I think the pandemic here impacted that tremendously too. Just the amount of, I don't even have a printer anymore. And I was one of those guys that printed everything. And I wonder how many people like me just kind of stopped using paper, as a result, just because you didn't have the luxury of having a lot of storage and an office, and you work, a lot of people working on their kitchen tables and things like that. They're not printing things out. So hopefully that'll be something that sticks.
My files are getting thinner, I have to say. I used to print out leases, all my lease drafts. I'd make my comments with hand, and then I'd scan it and send it to. Now I just do it on the computer, which it's harder on the eyes, but I save probably a half a dozen trees a year, not printing out 10 drafts of a lease of 75 pages. So what's interesting, with this work from home, I think another byproduct of that is going to be that I think homes are going to change, and people's residents are going to change, and maybe the corporation, there's talk of corporations, giving people less money when they don't come into the office, right? Silicon Valley, because the cost of living is much more expensive, but maybe there'll be an allowance for space or equipment or something to work from home. So I think in order to effectively work from home, I think you need a good quality workspace with a good quality chair, so I think that's going to drive changes in the residential market, I think, significantly as well. With the golden goose, if you will, of the real estate sector right now is the industrial market. And so for all you industrial companies, happy to say if you want to give up your industrial buildings, you will see returns like you've never seen before. I will tell you that industrial buildings are selling for significantly more money per square foot than vacant office buildings. So, and that's been in Long Island because of 2 main reasons. One is e-commerce, which we all know. Amazon currently leases about 350,000 square feet of last mile space on Long Island, and they have in planning or construction, probably another 700,000 square feet or 600,000 feet. So at the end of the day, in the next couple of years, Amazon will be one of the largest industrial space users on Long Island. They also, Home Depot just took a large block of space in Hicksville, and you're going to start seeing newer, modern industrial buildings being built for this last mile e-commerce, where they have high ceiling heights, wide column bays. So the industrial market is at an all-time high. We're seeing buildings sell for $175 a foot. Just to give you some perspective, 5-6 years ago, buildings were selling for $75 a foot. And so everyone knows of the Newsday facility on Long Island. It's a 50-acre site on Pine Lawn Road, just south of the expressway. Harts Mountain out of New Jersey purchased that site for about $48 or $50 million. So they purchased it for essentially $1 million an acre, and they're tearing down the old Newsday offices and printing plant, and they're going to be building 2 buildings on the site, totaling about 800,000 square feet of industrial space. So the rents that they need to get for that space are going to be in the mid to upper teens. So the rental rates for quality, state-of-the-art industrial buildings, no one thought we would get those type of numbers, and they're getting those type of numbers because the older buildings on Long Island, which were primarily built in the 60s and 70s, are functionally obsolete. They have low ceilings, tight column spacing, inadequate loading. You can't pull a 63-foot trailer into some of them. So, that market has been tremendous, the activity. The problem now is there is very little space available. Nassau County, which the vacancy rate has gone up, actually, but the quality space that people want to go to, most of the space that's available is somewhat functionally obsolete or dysfunctional. So we're almost at full occupancy in industrial. And in Nassau County, for example, there's literally no new sites to build on. Nassau County is a fully developed suburb. There's very little land available in Nassau County. Suffolk, there's land, but most of it's further east. And because Suffolk doesn't have sewers, in many places, the amount you can build on the land is a 17% coverage, which is extremely low. So, there's not the industrial market is probably in the best condition it's ever been in on Long Island. Rents have gone up to from the low single digits, $5-6 a foot net, to $9 to $12 a foot net, depending on where the buildings are and the type of buildings there are. So it's been a real positive for owners and occupiers of buildings and industrial land, but it's difficult for tenants now to find adequate space. And in fact, we're seeing office buildings now being converted back to industrial. And it would not surprise me in the least if the MSC industrial building, which is a 130,000-foot office building on Maxis, just south of the service road, if that doesn't get converted back into an industrial building instead of an office building. Lastly, I'll just go through briefly, because we're about out of time, the retail market. The retail market is, as you would expect, is hurting to some extent. There's been a repositioning, and that market's going to change. Like the office market, Hussein, as you said, possibly some office buildings in downtown Manhattan during the last cycle were converted to residential buildings. Maybe you'll get more reuse of some office buildings into mixed-use buildings to make up for the decline in office space requirements. But on Long Island, in retail, you've seen a lot of medical go into, Northwell's taken space in East Meadow in a former wall-bound supermarket. You're seeing residential conversions into some retail space, Amazon is talking about taking one of the old department stores in the Broadway Mall in Hicksville and converting that to a distribution facility. So you're going to see reuse, but the top malls in the country, like the Roosevelt Field Mall, those will reimagine themselves. They're putting in more restaurants, entertainment, and other type of spaces to make it work. So I think the retail market will recover because supply will decline in bad markets, and the properties will be repositioned and reused. And you look at the companies like Target that are taking smaller stores. They took a store up in Port Washington where the big box retailers are reimagining themselves. So I think there's going to be some tumult and some issues with the retail market, but the rents have been holding up reasonably in the better markets. They haven't been discounted, and partially because the Long Island operating expenses and real estate taxes are so expensive that, you know, in some of these retail spaces, over 50% of your rent is taxes and operating expenses and not rent going to the landlord. So I think, you know, I've kind of covered all the markets, I appreciate all of your input and conversation, and thank you very much for having this presentation today.
Hey, Brian, we still have 2 more polling questions, so I'm going to go ahead and launch those as well.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I forgot about those. Yes. The questions are, the last 2 questions are, given the pandemic and the distribution of the vaccine, do you think your company will leverage the real estate market to reduce or improve size and location, be more cautious and wait till the end of the pandemic and distribution of the vaccine before making any changes, or try to dispose of currently unused space to reduce overhead? And if you're looking to leverage the real estate market, feel free to give me a call. A little self-promotion, sorry about that.
Hey, Brian, while we're looking at those results, I guess one of the questions I had, I'm not sure if we're going to get to it, but if you can, just comment quickly. What do you think happens on the residential real estate side with the pandemic? Do you think things in Long Island become more expensive because people are flooding from the city to New York, and vice versa? Do rentals in Manhattan at a residential rate go down because there's a lot of vacancies?
Residential rates in Manhattan have plummeted, and they're going by the way of free rent. So they're giving, you know, you rent for a year, you could get 3 months free rent now in some buildings. Prices of Long Island real estate are supply and demand. I think that it depends what sector you're in. The millennials are looking for $1 million and under homes. Those homes are flying off the market due to the age of Long Island. All your homes in Upper Brookville and Old Westbury and the large multi-million-dollar homes are not doing well. And if you look at demographics, you could see why. The baby boomers to the millennials, that demographic has been as much smaller. So there aren't those trade-up people that are in their 40s that are now looking to go into those multi-million-dollar homes. So I would say it depends on the sector that you're in. Also, with SALT and not being able to deduct property taxes from your federal income, that also hurts the multi-million-dollar homes where taxes are $50,000 and $75,000.
Brian, could you just comment on the break-even point, or where the graphs cross on having last mile facilities not on Long Island? Like, does it get so expensive at a certain point that it's better to drive from Staten Island or upstate New York, like Westchester or something like that?
No, and the reason is that it'll cost a truck, a tractor trailer $60 to get over the bridge, and the time, you know, Amazon is going to a model where it's same-day delivery within hours, and I think that's why they're doing it. And so it's basically replacing retailers. So instead of going to the store, you're going to go online, get that last mile of distribution, and get those products same day. So I don't believe that's the case. And you know what? It's more expensive in New York City and Staten Island for industrial space than it is on Long Island. So you'd have to go pretty far away to get a meaningful reduction. And you could do that by going all the way out to Riverhead. So I don't see that as happening.
What about the implementation of advanced material handling systems, like going even higher in the Bay area, like up to 60 feet?
We haven't seen that on Long Island yet, but I have done a facility like that in New Jersey, a complete remote facility. That's the future. That's coming.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Great stuff. And I just,
I'm going to launch the last polling question here just for our friends that need CPE.
Okay.
put it in
I'll be
the,
back in one.
I put it in the chat.
Okay.
If you guys take a look, we have a holiday gathering on Monday, December 14th. Everyone's welcome to register. If you don't get a registration link automatically, just send me an email. I put my email in the chat as well. Everyone's invited to join us for this conversation and other stuff that I think is important to all of us, including just networking with each other as professionals on Long Island.
Thanks, Manny. This is Nick. Thank you.
Yep,
Yeah,
and then this is Kelly. I'll be sending out a thank you note later this afternoon. I'll include the link to register for the holiday gathering. So it'll be easy for you guys to sign up if you can join us.
Thanks.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you, Manny, for mentioning that. So, and Brian's contact information is going to go out as well in the thank you email. So again, and for any of you who are not members of our chapter or organization and are interested, please feel free to reach out to Manny or Barry as they head up the membership for the organization. And also, if there's anything else that you would like to see or hear from our organization and any other presentations, please respond back to that email with anything that you'd like to hear from us. So on behalf of the chapter, thank you all very much for participating, and I hope you all have a happy holiday, and hopefully we'll see you all on our holiday gathering on the 14th.
Great. Good
Sounds good.
weekend coming up.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Nature call.
Yeah. Thank you again, Brian. Yeah, I didn't see you on there. I didn't want to call you out and say thank you while you weren't there. So thank you again. Appreciate it, and hope you can join us as well for the holiday event. And thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Enjoy the
thank
rest of
you.
the week. Bye-bye.
Take care.